All right, wormlings, we are back. I went on a break, not a break that I wanted to go on. I've been dealing with a lot of life. It's been a lot of life shit. So haven't been able, it's been taking me forever and a day to really finish, getting this book done and just, learning about, we still, well, I'm like, I think a little over halfway done with the book. Let's go ahead and talk about the next chapter, chapter 9, which has to do with ADHD and emotions. Oh yeah, fun time. So the author opened up this chapter speaking on her own experiences with emotions and kind of how she was neglected and kind of how she was invalidated. Her feelings were invalidated and negated a lot. Now, I was initially going to talk about this and my own experiences and whatnot, but what I really want to do is focus on the whole aspects of our struggles with our own emotions and not the struggles of dealing of other people and how they treat our emotions. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? I want to solely focus on the latter that I said. I think I used that word right, latter. Maybe not, I don't know. Comment down below if I did or didn't. But, anywho, skipping, past that, I want to go ahead and just go straight into what we've learned, right? What the author has learned that she has imparted upon us and what we have in turn learned as well, right? And so going straight into it, ADHDers are emotionally dysregulated, right, for the most part, which means to have an impaired ability to control your emotional response, which can lead to extreme and or disproportionate reactions that are not necessarily appropriate to the situation. And unfortunately, it's not listed in the DSM, which I forgot what the hell that stands for. I don't know. I'll probably put it on the screen what DSM stands for. But it's the thing that you go into that lists the criteria for each, like mental disorder and what's not, right? And it's not listed, emotional dysregulation is not listed as part of the diagnostic criteria, but it doesn't mean that it's not a heavy component of ADHD, because it's been observed, right? And I'm sure there's a lot of people out here that can testify to that, right? And matter of fact, people with ADHD are oftentimes misdiagnosed with mood disorders because of this. So imagine how many people is running around right now that was misdiagnosed with like BPD or bipolar disorder, or who knows, the list goes on, right? Now, I want to reiterate this one more time, that although ADHD brains don't handle emotions well, that does not take away from the validity of feeling the emotions that we feel when others do not treat us well. And I'm reiterating this because, what we're going to be talking about can possibly be misconstrued as an opportunity for some people to either belittle their emotions because they have ADHD, or for some people to belittle the emotions of those with ADHD. Okay. So with that said, it's still important to take a look at what issues that some ADHDers struggle with, as well as remember that ADHD exists on a spectrum. So, even as I read this chapter myself, I could tell there were certain things like, yeah, that's not really a part of my experience. Well, so there's other things, well, yeah, that's part of my experience. So we continue. Why emotional regulation is hard for ADHD brains. Emotional regulation is the ability to exert control over one's emotional state, what allows us to calm down and make good choices when something gets us worked up. So this relies on about a handful of skills, such as inhibition. Okay, let's start with inhibition, which is basically not impulsively reacting to an emotion. Second skill is self-soothing, which, the ability to calm and comfort ourselves after experiencing an emotion. Third, refocusing our attention. We know what that is. And the last one would be the skill of responding to our emotions in a way that aligns with our goals for the situation. And these are all things that are difficult to do with ADHD. And even outside of people with ADHD, everyone's cognitive ability declines as our emotions rise. Just think of our brains as a traffic light that's missing the yellow light. So regular lights got the green, the yellow, the red. ADHD brain only got the green and the red. And so that's the way to compare it. These are universal human issues, right? And As with everything, when it comes to ADHD, the problem doesn't lie. The problem more so lies in we experience a lot of the same things, but we're missing certain things that maybe other people are, or we experience it to a different degree. Okay? So, next thing that we've learned is that emotional dysregulation gets us in trouble, right? So, as children and adults, we're easily overwhelmed by emotions, right? Leading us to have emotional meltdowns and for people to label us as overly sensitive or even immature. Our emotions go in extremes at times, both positive and negative, and too much of anything is a problem. Now, this can hurt ourselves, but it can also hurt others as well, depending on the way that it's expressed, right? So this keeps falling. I be trying to keep it up. It's been like this since I first got it. This little crop top here, it is what it is, right? But anyway, going back to it, what are one of the things that we try to do? We try not to feel. So oftentimes the inability to control our emotions leads to many ADHDers to suppressing or avoiding them instead, which, as you may know, is also not good. So it's just as bad as like going super extreme with emotions and having huge blow-ups, right? And this can include tactics such as avoiding situations that may bring up difficult emotions, distracting ourselves from them, reframing, right, or intellectualizing our emotions, trying to make a situation more tolerable with food or substances like alcohol or drugs, and even masking our feelings and pretending we're fine. And I don't know about y'all, but I've definitely done some of these things, and I personally have had a very bad habit for a very good chunk of my life, trying to avoid and suppress feelings to very much, a detriment. Going on to the next thing, right? And we've learned that chronically avoiding emotions is problematic. Piggybacking off of what we just talked about, right? As you would guess, doing all the things that we mentioned before comes with consequences. You can't just, employ these unhealthy, emotional tactics and expect it not to have a consequence, right? Every action has a reaction, right? So once we can no longer outrun the emotions, we won't be able to handle them. The longer it goes suppressed, the more intense the emotions become, especially if the situation that caused them has not been resolved. In children, what can happen is something called after-school restraint collapse. Yeah, after-school restraint collapse, the long one, where once a kid comes back from school, spending their whole time hiding and stifling their emotions, they have a full emotional meltdown at home. So think of like, a kid who's so just paranoid on trying to keep it together, trying to look normal all fucking day at school. They come home and just go fucking loose, just whole tantrum, going wild, just emotions, big emotions, intense, right? So that's an example of that. And when it comes to in adults on a psychological level, this can manifest as irritability, mood swings, or even panic attacks. And that's on a psychological level. And then on a physical level, this can manifest as sleeplessness, so not being able to sleep, chronic pain, gastrointestinal problems, and even sexual dysfunction. Something we need to remember, y'all, is that our feelings do not happen for no reason. As the author puts it, our emotions are like a smoke detector. There's times when it goes off and there's not a fire, right? Because the system can be a little, the smoke alarm system can be a little hypersensitive at times. But if it wasn't a fire that made the smoke alarm go off, that means it's still sensing some kind of smoke. And that in and of itself is worth looking into, right? And on top of those aforementioned psychological symptoms we discussed, there's other ones that can also crop up that can create distance between us and our feelings, such as, drum roll on the other problems it can give us, okay? Start off with dissociation, right? What's dissociation? It's the feeling of being disconnected or detached from your surroundings or even from yourself. Second one, anhedonia. At this point, we've mentioned so many psychological problems. I feel like we've mentioned a few psychological problems, so I'm not even gonna count them. So another one is anhedonia, which is the impaired ability to experience pleasure, even when doing something you usually enjoy. Another one is, I'm probably butchering the names of these disorders and stuff, or these psychological problems. But the next one is alexithymia, which is the inability or impaired ability to recognize and describe your feelings. And as you may have noticed, learning to feel your feels it can prevent and resolve so many issues that the latter can give you. Hoping I use that term right yet again. Not only do we need to feel our emotions, we need to be able to identify them as well, right? Because identifying it can really help us understand what needs may not be getting met, or to decrease our reactivity to negative emotions and experiences. This right here is something that therapists can help us with tremendously. I know some of y'all don't want to hear it. I know some of y'all don't want to hear it, but listen, especially it can really help, especially those of us that have, gone through abuse or trauma, because us humans, we're complex, and oftentimes we got layers of issues. You may have ADHD, but when you have ADHD and trauma you've been through, and maybe abuse that you've also been through, like really hard, who knows, physical abuse or whatever the case may be, it can make it harder, right? It can make it harder. The same way, I'm going to give an example of, like, let's say I'm trying to walk a mile, and every single time I walk like 2 minutes, I'm getting like something new put in my backpack, right? I got an empty backpack, I gotta go walking, a heavy ass brick gets put in the backpack, and I walk a few more minutes, and then I got a big ass book put in my backpack, then I walk a few more minutes, and then I get some other shit put in my backpack. You understand what I'm saying? It's gonna be really hard to finish walking your mile without the assistance of somebody else sometimes stepping in and helping, right? And the sleeping kitty right next to me. Oh, she's such a so adorable. She looks so cute right now, y'all. But I'm gonna go ahead and talk about my own experience in being emotionally avoidant, and my journey to, maybe not my journey, but I'll talk briefly about how therapy helped me, right? So I would say that I've been emotionally avoidant from the time maybe that I started to go through certain kinds of traumas, like specifically like mental and physical, all the way, starting from there. So I would say, from around the age of like 8 to 19. So for a good 11 years, for a good 11 years of my life, I was very emotionally avoidant. Or maybe 8 to 18, somewhere around there. 8 to 18, 8 to 19, somewhere around there. About around a decade of my life, I definitely spent very emotionally avoidant. Consistently emotionally avoidant, It kind of just, I would say, it stemmed from, similar to the author, my feelings constantly being dismissed and negated all the fucking time, right? For me, I'm like, you know what? I think the best way for me to get through my day-to-day is to just push it all down. Right, I pushed it all down, and then my own mother seemed to do the same thing. And although I felt like maybe this wasn't the best way to handle it, it's kind of tool I had available to me, right? Not a healthy tool, but the tool that I'm like, well, this seems like the best option, right? What other options do I have in terms of dealing with my emotions? And so that's what I did. One of the ways that it really started to show its head, I would say, would be in my first relationship that I got into as an adult. It was the first time I was in a relationship. I was 18. And it definitely reared its head, right? All of those years of being emotionally avoidant, now we're starting to wreak havoc on my romantic relationship and on me, you know what I'm saying? And I spent a lot of time in my first relationship just trying to avoid. And not only, and that was a tactic that I employed not only in my romantic relationships, but just, with myself. I was very hard on myself, for especially in my teenage years, about when it came to me feeling my emotions. And it's like I started to treat myself the way my own mother treated me, not very nicely, fast forward, I eventually ended up going into therapy when I was 21, and through therapy, it gave me a voice. Right now, I have been already doing the work on myself since I was 19. Since I was 19, I started to recognize, okay, I got a problem. I got some problems that I need to work through. And that's when I started doing the work on myself from 19 to 21. I did a lot of self-work, was really focused on healing. I fell off for a little bit at 19. I had gotten a little caught up with life, put my inner work on the back burner. But then I picked up back on it a little bit before I turned 20. And I've been at it ever since. I still haven't stopped. And I'm 24. It's been a 5-year journey, and it's a lifelong journey that will continue. Going back to the topic at hand, or at least let's go to the next thing that we've learned, right? Which is, how do we regulate our emotions, right? I mean, it's kind of a question, but I'm about to answer it, right? So there's 5 strategies that we can use to regulate our emotions. Side note, funny enough, I used to watch a lot of YouTube videos through like, the healing journey before I was able to find a therapist. And like, I feel like I'm like one of those videos that I watch. Like, this is almost similar to like videos that I have myself have watched to understand myself. So full circle moment, ain't it? But yeah, so the first strategy is situation selection, which is the ability to choose situations that are less likely to lead to emotional regulation challenges. So for example, we could go to a big gathering this weekend, right? Which sounds like fun, but because I know that with my social anxiety, because I know I have social anxiety, I know that things will not go well for me. So I'm going to select a better situation for myself, such as a small gathering to go to instead, so I can avoid having a possible anxiety attack and still be able to have fun. The second strategy we can use is situation modification, which is the ability to change or modify a situation known to trigger emotion dysregulation. So, for example, instead of me sitting next to the door at a meeting that I have to go to, I'm going to sit somewhere else because I know that I feel uneasy sitting near doors due to a traumatic event that I had experienced in the past, right? So I'm choosing to modify the situation that I have to walk into, right? Because I have no choice but to walk into that situation. So I'm going to modify that situation, which is different from situation selection, right? Do we see the differences? With one, I'm choosing to go to a whole nother location. In this instance, I'm choosing to tweak my situation before I even go into it in order to create a better experience for myself, in order to prevent certain issues from flaring up. Third strategy is cognitive change or reappraisal, which is the ability to change the way we view a situation or our emotional reaction to it, or how we think about how we manage our emotions in a particular situation. I know that was a fucking lot, but essentially that's just like, it's just being able to change our perspective on something in short terms, So strategy number 4 is attention deployment, which is the ability to turn our attention away from the source of hard to regulate emotions. So in layman's terms, that just means distracting yourself. The fifth strategy is response modulation, which is the attempt to alter our emotional response. So now I want to say this differs from strategy number 3. It can look more like, one's social anxiety flaring up and, and feeling these physical sensations, like, your heart palpitating and you sweating and you start to begin to practice like breathing exercises to combat it, right? It's making sense? I hope it is. So it's do you feel it? So you can feel it more. It's a physical and emotional response, right? Versus the other one's more mental, psychological, right? All right, so with that, we are now at our toolbox section, right? And with this toolbox today, it's about learning how to cope with big emotions, right? Even the act of non-judgmentally noticing our emotions can make it easier to handle. Many of us struggle with being able to tell the difference between feelings or thoughts. I know I definitely did. But just a quick reminder, feelings are physical, okay, or emotional experiences, whereas thoughts are mental cognitions. So our ideas, opinions, and beliefs. Something that the author recommended, which I'm like, that's a really great idea, is one-word journaling, which basically helps differentiate, the feelings versus the thoughts, because the thoughts take many words to describe versus feelings which only require one. So honestly, that's something that I might try myself, just opening up a blank page and seeing what comes out. And so as always with the toolbox section, I'm going to go ahead and list off the tools that she has gained and tell you guys what strategy from, that overarching tool that I myself have used, right? So tool number 1 is labeling your emotions. All right, so I had to sit down and take some time to really think about it, and like, the suggestions, for like the strategies for the tool of labeling your emotions that she suggested, I feel like none of them are ones that I currently use, and I can't remember if in the past if I have, because to be honest, when it comes to labeling my emotions, I feel like I've kind of gotten to a point where I'm pretty good at doing it pretty quickly, even though back then I did struggle with it. And it's kind of hard to say what got me to this point, but I feel like, I'll just say for me, I feel like it's just a matter of sitting with it. I don't know, just letting myself be fucking quiet. And I guess maybe like a form of meditation in a way that could be equivalent to that, like sitting in silence or just giving myself some space to process, and then eventually I'm like, okay, this is what I was feeling. But I can't really like label anything in particular, but that's what I'll say that I kind of be doing. But I will, talk about real quick, one of the suggestions that the author gave, which is labeling the intensity, meaning sometimes, we can label what the emotion is, but you can tell how intense the emotion is in and of itself. So you can, go on a scale of like 1 to 10, where it's like, I feel like I'm somewhere at a 7, I'm somewhere at a 1. Or another suggestion that she gives with this part, with this strategy, is assigning colors to the emotions, right? So, okay, I'm feeling like a red, and red means angry, or I'm feeling like a green means happy, blue means calm, and like just, when you struggle to think of the exact emotion, labeling that color and assigning that color to it can make it a little easier. So that's kind of one of the suggestions that she gives. But yeah, now on to the next one. The second tool is making space for your emotions. And when we make space for our emotions, it can combat the negative beliefs that society has instilled into us, when it comes to emotions, right? And it can help us process it and validate how we are feeling. The part of the tool that I used was waiting before taking action, right? And so, for example, I would, and I still do this to this day, right? Which is taking time outs from heated arguments, just allowing emotions to fizzle out so I can articulate it better later on. Because, to be honest, and I'm sure a lot of us have noticed this, that when you make decisions in the heat of the moment, it's not going to end well. Sometimes you decide to say things that you shouldn't be saying, or sometimes you decide to make changes in your life in the heat of the moment that you should not be making when you run in that high on emotion. Okay. And then third tool is using our emotions. So something we have to remember is that feelings are like, they're indicators, right? They indicate something to us, right? So whether it's them telling us that we need more of something, that we need less of something, that we need to keep moving forward with something, or that we have to do something different. So this leads into the part of the tool, which is using them as a compass. So maybe it's like, hey, whenever I watch certain types of YouTube videos, they make me feel upset, right? And so now here's the emotional compass, like, all right, so it's steering towards upset, right? And so when we follow that and engage with why it's making us feel upset, it'll indicate to us whether it's, okay, is this making me upset because it's super disrespectful to to women, and there's no beneficial value coming from it, or is it making me feel upset because it's showcasing some of the defunct ways in which our healthcare system is set up, and that is pushing me now to look more towards into it. But you exploring why you feel upset will let you know now, okay, what the next steps to take. But you couldn't get to that part if you just ignored the feeling of being upset in the first place. The last tool is tool number 4, finding your emotional balance, right? So although we can't control our emotions for real, we can adjust our emotional volume. You can crank the volume down by employing certain methods. I think there's a couple parts of this tool that I've partaken in. One of them is putting effort into the things that I can't control, and this is a big one. And with this one, I'm gonna get a little open about this. There may be a lot that I cannot control in my life. Like currently I am unhoused, and that is something that I cannot control in my life. But something I have been able to control is being able to read this book. That has been within my control. And by utilizing my ability to control that, it takes off the focus from looking at my external circumstances that I cannot control. And by the time that y'all see this, that will no longer be my current reality. But during this extended period of time that I've had to deal with these unhoused circumstances, I've had to definitely employ a lot of focus into the smaller aspects of my life within my reach. Another part of this tool that I've used as well is seeking support before and taking breaks from emotionally difficult situations. And the way I've employed this is by taking the weight off my shoulders, taking a pause, and going to watch a YouTube video or a cartoon, and then taking away the expectations for the day. And between, these two things, focusing on what I can control and, just making things less motherfucking burdensome for me, it's really helped a lot, y'all. And by me doing this, it's made a lot of days of my life go so much easier. But it's really important to take note that doing this, right, if you start to do this heavily, you're going to chronically be avoiding your emotions all the time. And this is where we say, like, this is, you know what I'm saying, too much of anything is a bad thing, right? You know, I can't sit here and take a pause and go watch a YouTube video every single time I have a negative emotion, but it does serve me well to go and do that sometimes, right? There's days when, and this is where you have to learn how to gauge your barometer of what you can handle, you know, because we all have like a, you know, like a thermometer, right? Where the thermometer has these different numbers on this level where it goes from cold to hot, right? And if I'm all the way over here at the about to tip over to the top, then it's time for me to clock the fuck out for the rest of the day and go sit my ass down and watch a fucking, I don't know, Scooby-Doo, okay? But I also should be able to gauge that if my barometer is only midway, then maybe I don't need a clock out for the rest of the day, but maybe I just need to engage in some breathing exercises. And part of my ability of knowing when to do that is because I've taken the time to gauge out my own emotions, to explore, like we talked about earlier, to explore my own emotions, to figure out, okay, what is necessary for different levels of my thermometer, my emotional gauge. Now with that, we're gonna go ahead and transition into the author's closing thoughts, right? And so, as she explored her emotions, she noticed that she categorized her feelings into different boxes of acceptable, somewhat acceptable, and unacceptable. And it's a system that she created internally based on trauma, okay? Based on trauma, familial upbringing, and societal norms, to name a few. But the thing is, these categorizations were not serving her well because, truthfully, emotions are emotions. We are allowed to feel them all. None of them should be neglected. They should all be explored. You know, there should be no box, right? It's all one big box that they exist in. And we shouldn't shy away from feeling certain ones. We should go ahead and pay attention to each one and say, why is this coming up? Why are you here? Let me take a minute to go ahead and figure out why you're here. And for a long time, the author herself had a really bad habit of suppressing emotions. And until she finally made a really huge leap in therapy, she let herself be angry. Yep, that's what she did. She let herself be angry. And to quote the author, and I'm gonna put it on the screen, "It's progress to be able to feel and express your emotions, even the ones we've come to believe are bad. Because if we can't do that, if we can't manage our emotions effectively, our emotions manage us. If we don't know how to respond to them, we can only react to them." Beautifully said. And you know, the author, she had a progression from, I'm about to say some bars. She had a progression from suppression to healthy expression of emotion. Ooh, she's finally able to tame it, sit with it, and express it in a way that no longer is hurting more than helping her. And mind you, even with the tools that she's obtained, the big feelings still happen. That goes for all of us. Hell, even with the tools I have obtained, the big feelings are still going to happen because life still happens, okay? But now she's been able to build herself an emotional boat that she can tether herself to whenever she starts to drown. And not only does emotional regulation serve her and you and me, it also helps us all be able to support others with their emotions too. That's Kelly. And with that wormlings, that is all for that chapter on ADHD and emotions. When we let our emotions go unchecked, it can really wreak a lot of fucking havoc, and we don't want that, right, wormlings? But you know, yeah, I'll go ahead and see y'all in the next video, next chapter. And yeah, that's it. That is all, wormlings. Y'all got a little sneak peek from my friend over here. But yeah, see y'all soon. Okay.